Hey, welcome to our office hours webinar, 29th of November. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving weekend. So today we are going to talk about sales operations, metrics, and if you're brave enough to structure and also chat services, how does it all going to tie up, etc. So sort of thought this is not proposal metrics, and I would like you to step really up and start to look at it on a much more as a senior executive of how we are going to structure your team and what sort of processes, what sort of tools, what sort of integration do we need to have in place to make it work. So let us proceed with the overall working. So the overall slide is structured into few parts. So we're going to look into the key components of sales operations or business winning function and understand the best practices or some metrics related to business winning. And we are going to look into if you are restructuring your big teams, what's the right way to restructure. As we talked about, chat services, proposal centers, set up do's and don'ts, and finally, what's happening in the domain now. So always metrics. When you hear of metrics, you cannot move on from Howard. As you know, Howard Nutt, founding director of PD Institute, who's a veteran, APMP founding member, and my mentor. So many accolades there. It's when you talk about metrics, this man single-handedly has given so much to the industry. So I'm going to sit on his shoulders and talk you through most of his findings and also all his hard work for 30 years, plus some of the industry standards and other things that are on top of it as well. So even before you begin, I just want you to ask this question. What's the name of your big team? Which team do you belong to? Are you head of pre-sales? Are you head of bid management? Are you sales director, commercial director? What's not just your title, but what's the name of your big team, right? It's super important, name of your big team. So you can start to see there is no one form of this is the best practice, this is how things needs to go. You're going to see from the terminology, is it sales operations? Is it business winning? Is it just big team, or is it sales teams? I don't know, but write in the chat, what's the name of your big team, right? While you do that, there is also some polls that I would like you to have a look at. In the polls, we're going to go deeper on a lot of questions. So let's go and have a look at some of the questions. Let me launch the poll. Question number 1 is, what level does your team report into? You need to think about, does your team report into the chief exec themselves, or is reports into a person who sits on the board? So it's 1 level below chief exec, or it goes 2 level below chief exec because it reports into divisional MDs or divisional sales directors, who then reports into divisional chief exec, and he then reports into group chief exec, etc. Or I don't know. So what level does your team report into? It tells you the importance of your team. The next one is, which of the overall organization does your big team report to? Which means, are you part of sales team, or are you part of marketing, or are you part of commercial? Are you part of engineering or IT or anything technical, or I don't know really. So what's your choices? Which overall function does your team sits under? Sales, marketing, commercial, engineering or equivalent, technical, or I don't know. Next one. In your team, how does your team apply? What model applies to you? Number 1, it's centralized at the corporate level, at the HQ level, at the group level. It's decentralized and it's embedded within operating units, which means you have different services, you have different products, you have different geographies, and your big teams just work around those elements, bidding for the products, bidding for the services, bidding in those geographies. There is no connection to the top. It's all decentralized. Or you have self-contained. Yes, we do have a kind of a decentralization, but it doesn't happen at the group level. It happens at the operating unit level. So that's something that also happens. And finally, hybrid, where some element sits in the group and the other element sits within the operating units, which means big important tenders are done at group level, and tactical deals, specific deals that needs to be customized at the local level is done at this level. Right? So we are going to build up how your sales process or how your sales operations is building upon. The next one is think about what tools are not available in your organization. What tools are not available? When I say organization, it could be just your team, which is the sales team, which represents your overall growth, or it could be just the company itself. But either way, what tools are not available to your organization? Number one is sales and pipeline management, marketing and analytics, comparative intelligence and research, knowledge management and bid collateral library, and finally, price benchmarking and price to win. So which of these is not available to you? Do you have a comparative intelligence team? Do you have a bid collateral knowledge library team? Do you have a price benchmarking or price to win team, or the marketing analytics teams? Not available. So you might have one or two that's available. Think about what's not available. And this is a key point. Do you have a structured career path in your organization? Yes or no? Yes or no? So do you have a single standard process in your organization? Yes or no? How often does the process is waived, that standard single is waived by the pursuit leaders? Not at all. We stick to it like as if that's the important document ever. Some opportunities we do kind of go over. No, the process is very fluid in our company. We just use it as a guidance, but we just change it all the time. Right? So now let's look at the volume of opportunities that you go for. How many bids do you tender a year? This varies depending on who you are. Do you tender 20 opportunities or less? Do you tender somewhere close to 21 all the way to 100? You know what? We churn a lot more opportunities, 100 to 500, or in this cases, we churn even 500 plus opportunities. That's like 20 to 25 bids a year. Right? Some organizations do a lot more, but let's see 500 plus. So how many bids do you tender? Out of the bids that you tender, how many do you perceive, from your opinion, from what you know in your organization, or strategic or must win? 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, or I don't know, we just bid, right? So the final question in the overall poll is, when do you invest in your resources and budgets? After receipt of RFP, that's where you do most of the investment. No, we invest lots more before on the sales, on the capture, and the comparative intelligence price to win. So we only pick up very slick proposals at the very end. That's like 80% already spent before the tender. Or no, our organization does complex deals, so we actually spend a lot more money on closing the deal in the contract negotiation. Or it's a uniform spread before, during, after. Or it's like a bell curve. We peak on the release of RFP and it declines after submission RFP, but we do have some residual budgets that we allocate before the tender and after the tender. Or the answer is, I don't know. So the results is I'll leave you for a minute or two, but in the meantime, I'll just give you the actual, what the survey that was done 2 years ago by Howard actually told us the market, which means most of the team, they either report into CEO or one level below CEO. So which means 55 to 60% of the sales or BD function reports to either chief exec or one level below chief exec, and the rest just went on 2 level below or more, right? Mostly it's with the chief exec or 1 level below chief exec. So which of the sales function does your bid team belong to? Majority, 2/3 was in sales, some in marketing, some sales function were called commercials. Those are the organizations that just went on, but predominantly the bid team sat with the sales. Which model applies to you? Is it a centralized or a decentralized or hybrid? As expected, over 50% had hybrid versions. And then there was a spread between centralized and decentralized. Centralized is everything done centrally, decentralized, everything done locally, but hybrid was the preferred option. What tools are not available? Funnily enough, comparative intelligence was the least available tool, followed by price to win, most companies had some form of knowledge library. They all had sales pipeline, but marketing analytics, they think they existed, but not necessarily it was used within their own bid function. It was all standalone. What sales intelligence they had, competitive intelligence they had, marketing intelligence they had, it's all being done, but not necessarily it was utilized within the company. A defined career path, only 1/3 believed that they had a defined career path within the organization. Mostly it was you need to create your own role, which is expected. Over 90% said they have a single standard process of what's going to expected. And as you know, out of the 90 odd percentages, close to 30% said, even though we had a fluent process, but some with another 50% saying, it's with some opportunities, we just customize it, but mostly it's strict, but only less than 20% actually said, no, we follow a rigid process. The number of bids varied, whether you are bidding for federal government, whether you're bidding for local government, or it's US, UK, and other sectors. Mostly commercial organizations, the organizations that bid for B2B tend to bid a lot more than organization that does government tenders. So they were doing a lot more, which goes at 100 to 500 plus, whereas most think that bid between 20 to 100. So how many of the opportunities are strategic? It swings between 10 to 25%. That was the average that came out with, but your organization might have it differently. Again, when do you invest in resources and budget? The bell curve, which is like peak on the release of the RFP, where you allocate all your team, and the decline comes up after the projects, is the other one. So these is some of the poll questions, and the results will be out after the end of the webinar. So that's it. So what that means is, the sales operation is a much more complex subject than what we anticipate, because we all play a role on it, but not necessarily unless you are a budget holder of the sales function, you won't have a good handle of what's happening within end-to-end of your own function. So some of the key metrics or the important metrics that most organizations use, or it's been recommended for a long time, is these things, which is win rate. How many opportunities did you win by the number of, how many opportunities did you win divided by the number of opportunities, or what we call the win ratio, which is also called the capture ratio, which is like the total value of opportunities won to the total value of opportunities bid. So preferably both the numbers should have the same percentages, but imagine if your win rate is 80% and if your capture rate is 20%, what that tells you is you're winning a lot more of the low value opportunities and you're losing many of the higher value opportunities. That's why. So ideally, it should be there around the same mark. Why is status of top opportunities? As you could say, as the top of the funnel, just come in, lots of opportunities get in, but when you know the key must-win opportunities, where are we? Are we moving in the right direction? How many of the opportunities are we qualified? In the final 2, final 4, and in the PQQ stages, etc. And win probability is super important for you. And the revenue compared with target. Again, this is like, what are the current and completed pursuits that you have, that you already have bankable, and what are the things that you're working to. In total revenue, this is the full funnel that you have. Depending on your win rate, you might need to have 3 times, 4 times, or twice the amount of revenue that you need to go for. So if your win rate is say 30%, then you need to have 3 times the number of value of the opportunities in the funnel, so that your funnel is giving you, so you bid 3 opportunities and you win 1, but your win rate is 50%, then you need to have at least twice. So total revenue in the funnel. Expenses compared, very little organizations actually have a good track on how much do they spend, because they normally track about how much do they win. So best in class organization also have good visibility of the project cost, overall project costs, and overall big team cost, how much of that is fixed, how much of the incremental, which is allocated to external agencies, and how many of the projects is actually allocated to key bids and routine bids, etc. So in your organization, what are the 5 metrics that you operate on, or do you use any of those metrics? It's something. So what's the best in class definition? What's the best in class companies do? As you can see, the win rate, depending on your companies, some say 50% is a very good win rate for new business, And for capture ratio, 60 to 65% is a good rate. And most importantly, if it's renewal bid, then your win rate should be even higher at around 70% mark. And new business, it's around 40, 45%, giving you a blended 50 to 60, 70% if you have a lot more renewals in the blender. But either way, the win rate, if you are, this is where it gets interesting, because you can do a lot more bids, but where does it come in? Because it just tells you where your focus is. Many organizations not focus on win rate. They just want to focus on, hey, end of the day, a win rate could be 10%, but you're still winning. You're still getting our revenue. So don't worry about that. No, it's just a value. But it's important to have measurements and important to just see, are you spending the best resources on the best bits? And that's what these two metrics give you. So the return on investment is another key one, which is like how much budget. So $1 that you spend on sales, it gives you 75 times the value, because that's the actual metric. But again, in your organization, just think about if your overall sales team's cost is, say, $5 million, are you winning 75 times that amount of money in your annual revenue chart? If it's a large corporate company, this is the number. But as the number of, as the value of the turnover of your business is low, if you're a consultancy company or if you are a mid-tier small scale companies, normally this number will be slightly lower, as little as 20 into 1 or 1 into 10, right? So keep that in mind. So again, what are the shortfalls is, the win rate can only be calculated after the completion of projects. Status of top opportunities, it's very good. We look, but sometimes there could be other opportunities which we might think it's not tactical, not important, but that might flip through on the other things, which means it's, yes, it's good 80-20, but there is also a false side towards it. Primarily focusing on the revenue and the total revenue. Obviously, it looks at the potential revenue. So we tend to make decisions that are critical. Okay, halfway down the line, we realize we have already attained 80% of the revenue. That creates a certain behavior for the next of the half year. Or we only attain 20% revenue. So let's bid, let's do whatever we need to do to get that number. It just behavior. So expenses compared to budgets, again, when you map that revenue standing with this one, you're going to get a lot more interesting numbers. When you go much more tactical on the proposal metrics, some of the things that you can look for is, okay, we already said, are you bidding 20 opportunities or 1,000 opportunities, right? Have a look, understand how many RFPs have been submitted, how many RFPs have been submitted, but before that, how many RFPs have been received. So have a good ratio between, project submitted versus project received. It gives you your qualification, right? How many have you bid, no bid, and you just went on. Cost bid as well. Again, do you have a certain number so that you could allocate a budget? So any strategic bid, I'm going to allocate $500,000. Any routine type of bid, I'm going to allocate $100,000 or something. Again, if you know the cost per bid, you can start to allocate budget and measure accordingly. Then it's, if you look at the proposal manager level, how long does it take to draft a proposal? Right? How long does it take? It takes 1,800 hours, 2 proposal managers, 1 bid writer to get the job done. Normally for us, or plus external resources, and so on. So content usage, again, some companies spend a lot of time and money on this. Some companies don't even have a process, so they just rely heavily on just on the reuse library. Some companies, they don't even have reuse. But it's good to see, out of the timing, if you know the time it takes to draft a proposal by reusing the library, are you be able to squeeze 1 or 2 more proposals because your time it takes to draft a proposal is low. Some of the metrics, but again, why do you need to measure all these metrics at a very senior level? Again, Howard has done tons and tons of researches, and some of these key pointers are, we just need, we all talk about winning, but it needs to guide your overall BD operations. It needs to say, okay, as a function, we are not just winning, we are adding a lot more. We are positioning ourselves competitively, and also we are using the details to invest more on systems, tools, process, people, etc. And again, that's the whole point here. It helps not just BD operations, but BD processes, and also it helps you to manage, mitigate any risks that comes with it. So now, if we take a step back and say, okay, before proposals landed, there are a lot of other things that happens, right? So what are the 3 or 4 levels that happens before? Number one is what we call strategy part, or even before strategy, some of elements that goes in there. So do you have any processes or tools or people allocated to this, to these 4 buckets? It's all, because all these things comprises into what we call the business winning function. So I'm not going to go into details on this, but have a look on is anybody working on customer analysis, qualification, capability, competitive assessment, initial price to win, working on discriminators, etc. So when you know these bids are going to come in, you know, somebody's already working on it. It's pre-capture, by the way. Pre-capture and pre-strategy. So it's market research functions and so on. So again, when the process, you know, most companies will have proposal, but what are the pre-element that you have in front? That's it. So then comes the most important point. You know what, now I not only know the 3 or 4 stages that I need to have before a proposal, but I also need to know how am I categorizing the proposal. Number one, are these opportunities just must-win opportunities and routine opportunities, or am I categorizing them into this is transformational? It's going to transform our market position. These opportunities are going to preserve our market position. And in these opportunities, you know what, we are already in this market, we are just participating in this. So by slicing and dicing your opportunities into this level gives you, you know, a lot more into, you know, your impact that you can create within your organization. What's transformational, what's critical, what's vital, right? And how much of the work that needs to go in, because you, if you are a person, you know, you are very happy to work on the same type of services, same type of product bids, then you know what, then that's routine, right? But if you are a person who are willing to work on transformational must-win opportunities that, you know, yes, you might not have the domain expertise, that's how you create your own role within your company, right? So this is where you're going to find many companies, they don't have a defined role for the big team. Is because all you have this is a lot more opportunities that they could give on. It's entirely up to you to just find your path around the opportunities that you're given. Right? So does your organization segment your proposals, not just by the overall process, 4 or 5 stages, but does you segment the proposals into different buckets, and how do you allocate resources? What process does it follow, right? So resource allocation as it stands, you know, if as they say, strategic bids needs to be given a lot more investments, and the operational bids or the routine bids needs to be balanced out with the, so 2/3 of the budgets needs to be allocated to the strategic bids, and 1/3 of the budget needs to be allocated to the other routine and operational. So hopefully the strategic bids also is the bids that's going to help you to get your revenue number as well. So we'll focus again on proposal segmentation, because it not just helps you to define what the key bids are, but it's also going to help you to utilize your efficiencies in your organization. So now you've got a fair idea about, you know, what happens, what are the metrics that I need to go for, and what are the functions that needs to be happening. But you know what, let's take a step back and see, I am going for a total rewrite of my business winning function, and I'm going to create what I call a proposal development center or a shared services, you know, and I'm going to restructure, as we talked about, is it centralized, decentralized, hybrid? For that to happen, you know, many companies, they start with an Excel sheet. These are the people we have, these are the pipeline of opportunities that we have, and let's just create a structure, right? And then, or some companies, they just do it properly on underlying, okay, what facilities do we have? What processes are already in place or we need to develop? Who are the people do we need to have, and how are we going to structure these people? Who reports into what, at what geography? Is it going to be product line based? Is it be geography based? Or it's going to be just, as we talked about, is it going to be transformational bids versus strategic bids versus routine bids, big ticket bids versus normal bids? Then you decide, okay, all the big ticket bids will be done at group level, and all the tactical or routine bids done at operational level. Or either way, you decide, no, all the bids will be done in one form, or all the bids in divisional. Either way, you're just going to look into that. Underpinning this, so all the tools that you have in your organization, also list them and then find the gaps. We have an exhaustive list here, which you can find here. Then you're going to see the overall process, because as I said, 90% of the organizations have some form of the proposal process. Yes, some form of the proposal process. But what happens here is this. which is going to be like, where does the sales team get involved in the overall process, right? If you structure, as we talked about in the fourth thing, which is foundational part, strategy, capture, and then proposals, do we have a deep dive on who does what, market analysis, some international level assessment, partner assessments, and so on. So next come the capture and the proposal development cycle. Who gets involved on that? What sort of budgets, what sort of tools do we need to have in place? Next comes actual mobilization, which is now the contract has been won. We just need to go ahead and mobilize these contracts into something. Then comes post-contract award, which is operations. Does your proposal process, or what we call a sales process, does it include only the proposal phase, or does it include a lot more, which is from start, as they call it, cradle to grave, which is like from the start of building relationship all the way to forming a contract and renewing the project for that. So think about the 4 different phases of it. Some organizations have gate 0 all the way to gate 5, gate 6. Some just have what we call the black hat, rose hat, pink hat, and so on. So, and some organizations, they don't have a specific names for the process, but they do have a governance gates involved. What that means is your overall building blocks could very well be, sales team, could very well be bid management, and your commercial pricing, legal guys. Then what we call some guys who just manage the sales operations, sales reporting, CRM, etc. They don't get involved on any bids, but they just keep it going, measure all these metrics that we talked about. Then we have the subject matter experts, your designers, your, and then your writers, and also, your desktop publishers, etc. Then on this side, you have your renewal, which is contract directors, account managers who come in there. Then again, you have the mobilization, transition, project management officers, and finally, your knowledge library and others, So either you might have a team or you might have just a tool, but these are some of the building blocks. Your strategy director, if you have an acquisition, again, any acquisition that you make, you just need to bolt on that collateral that you got from that company, those people, those resources, those systems needs to be integrated from there. Don't forget your marketing and comms. And finally, if you have a product team or anybody, also include them. So this is your generic bidding engine block. So ask yourself, how is your team structured? How is, now do you have, you might think it's just a proposal team, but what are the other extended functions that you have, your entire ecosystem? Then you decide whether you're going to centralize it or decentralize it. Best practices say hybrid organizations tends to succeed a lot more. In the past, it used to be centralized organizations tends to win a lot more. But it depends on your sector. It depends on the type of opportunities that you go. If you're going for low value routine opportunities where it's less national, but it's a lot more local than decentralized at business units helps. But if you're going from a lot more national opportunities and international opportunities, it's centralized or the hybrid model that works, but that comes with the additional cost. So look into how your organization is structured, but when you decide to go for scale, then you decide is that fit for purpose and do what it takes. Again, these are some of the metrics that you can start using. Okay, now I know what type of opportunities and what type of structure I need to build. I'm going to bucket those people in those different structures, different FTEs and different, so the bid management team will be centralized, whereas one bid writer, one pricing person will be at the business unit level. So the knowledge library and other things will be at shared services level and so on. So you just work around it and create your structure. But this is a kind of a rough sketch. If you do going for a transformation, don't go for a full shebang, 3 to 6 months. I'm going to change everybody's role. Obviously, not everybody will be ready for change, as you know. But if you do that in phased manner, big bang structure, sales process sorted, who sits where sorted, then the capability assessments and training and other things begins. then gradually you're going to have further investments on technology, tools, integration, processes, etc. Just best practices say 1 billion plus organization takes close to 0 to 12 months to do it, where they have 2 phases of transformation period 1, transformation period 2, and this is some of the examples that you have done. So your organization, as I mentioned, it could be reporting directly to the CEO, or it could be one level down and it will be reporting to somebody within your sales function. So depending on that, how you structure it. So, and this is layer by layer we're getting. I know this is very dense because sales operations and business winning as a process is not easy. So when you look into this, then you define, okay, how much deeper do you want to get into that? Okay, I get an RFP, I submit an RFP. In between, I do go through, I have a standard process of big no bid gates and some reviews, and I have a team that goes through that. Or you simply map out from kickoff all the way to printing and submitting, step by step, who does what resources, what budgets, and so on. So that's your detailed step there. Same thing with the reusing. It's like, okay, if I did bit by bit, I'm going to do this, lessons learned, I'm going to do it, but I'm also going to incorporate all the lessons learned in my knowledge library and other things as well. Finally, I've just now decided, I think it's time to have a lot more. This is what the best-in-class companies do. They don't just have a big team. They have what we call an analytics team or some external team. So all they do is they don't get their hands dirty on bids, but they do all the support to give it for the bid. So now just take a step back and you redo everything again, but thinking that you're going to build up what we call a proposal development center, which is a hub-based model. What you're going to do, as you can clearly say, proposal development center is not just your big team with some processors and tools just hanging around. It's a much more cohesive, it's much more powerful, and it's built to win. This is very different to I have a big team and I also have a sales process and I also have bid for this, and I also have some metrics that I go for a CRM. This is much more solid. So why is it important? It's world-class companies do it, but again, question yourself, do you have a proposal development center? Do you have what we call the shared processes, etc.? So why is it? It stands here, it's increased win rate, it's increased the capacity, increased efficiency. And you know what? Many organizations relies on few people for success. What this one does is just democratizes the knowledge even more, so that the organization succession planning is much more in a robust state. So it's not like X person is there, he's always been the winner, he's always been the person who's go-to guy or girl. And this kind of helps you to streamline the work in who's the best person to do what. So tools, people, you already touched it. And what that means is you can now create a structure. This is just an example, say, and this could be internal as well. So for example, you have your client and then you segmented your opportunities into transformational, must-win, key opportunities, which is not transformational, but it's still important for me to win. These are vital opportunities. And I know this is the rough time scale for each of those opportunities. I have a 3-year window. I know these are the rough people who will be involved on those opportunities. And I have a gap here. Guys, this is where I'm going to go into external agencies for support. But I've taken one step back and say, I have a good view of what we can do and what we can't do. And you kind of have an overall arrangement with somebody else external like us or anybody else who just say, hey, we want to win $500 million in the next 3 years. This is the capability that we have. Work together with us. Give us your expertise. Let's build up what we call a structured continuous improvement plan that's going to take us forward. So you see your internal resources, you help them, mentor them, recruit any additional resources, then fill them up with your associates for capability gaps. Then you also create a shared, not just resource pool, but also shared success criteria, and you just build it from there. So it's there, but finally, you also then go ahead and then do your things. So gradually you build it up, as a very simple model. Whether you're structured locally, whether you're structured centrally, you just do it. But there is because we started with metrics, let's just close with metrics. So, there are some companies, especially some agencies, who over rely on win rate. It's much easy for you to go and say, hey, you know what, I have done training-based projects. I've done 100 training projects. My win rate is always 95% or more. But it's, as a company, you just need to decide win rates on multiple levels. What is my overall win rate? What is my win rate on new opportunities? What is my win rate on renewal opportunities? What is my win rate on transformational opportunities? What is my win rate on routine opportunities? You have to have a breakdown of a lot more, for you to get a good view of what's your real win rate. But even then, it's an over-reliance, right? It's an over-reliance, but again, you can pick and choose, as I mentioned, what you want to include. And that just gives you, because of the sales commissions and so many things, you can actually tweak that metric. But then the problem is, suddenly you realize, what, I'm going to have this massive study now. And I'm going to bring in a standard. I'm going to bring in somebody to just do a complete analysis of where we are in this organization now, and then see starting point. This is a point in time date. After that, it's completely forgotten. Any improvements, etc. It's like, I still go back and do my old ways, but all this is good. It just helped me to understand where I am, or it helps few people to grow in their company, help them on the business case for their own reasons, but then the company goes and does the same thing. So now it just helps to cover some of the symptoms, but it never goes and finds the causes of why we are doing what we are doing. The most important thing, the overall thing, is why metrics and other things, even though you can have it, it's a behavior thing, right? The moment you realize somebody's measuring the number of hours it takes to do a proposal, number of hours it takes to do a bid, your costs are monitored, or it just tells, what, we need to fill this gap, guys. We need to win $100 million. Here is an open book budget. It takes a different level of personality, different level of behavior. So it's so that's why metrics and behaviors, they go hand on hand, and you need to be very, very careful the underlying principle of why your metrics does it. So that's the kind of an overall thing. We talked about some of the quick polls. One of the quick polls that we have is, will you stay or will you move? It will run all through December, early January, just to get a good idea of about, as Christmas, New Year comes up, we all will look for options. So we look into, what's next for me, that's one. It's important. But today we covered sales operations and business winning metrics. We looked at the pros and cons of different approaches. We also looked at some of the polls, the 10 questions in the polls, and also the average metrics for each of those polls, why they are good, why they're not good, and how systematically we could build some structure in our company, or if you go for a big shebang of proposal development center, what's the do's and don'ts of those things. And finally, the Office Hours webinars will still continue. Next week, we have Richard talking us about mind-blowing PowerPoint. So we'll see you there then. But thank you again for joining today. Sorry for the hiccup, and the recording will be available at the same on-demand link. I'll see you very soon. Take good care. Lots of love. Take care. Bye.